Matthew Disher here, host of the American Guns Podcast, reminding you that the show that you are listening to is part of a network of shows, all pro-freedom content, all great stuff. So check us out at selfdefenseradio.net.
Welcome to Unload and Show Clear, the podcast about all things IDPA. And now, here's your host, the slayer of non-threats, Lloyd Bailey.
Welcome to another episode of Unload and Show Clear. This is a podcast about the men and women who are involved in IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association. While the vast majority of the people who compete in IDPA matches around the world, they're not superstars. They're just everyday people. They're your neighbors, doctors, bankers, IT professionals, pilots, law enforcement officers, military veterans, accountants, people from every walk of life who strap on a gun and some extra magazines and a vest on the weekend and go out and test their skills and have a great time. But our sport does have its share of superstars. And like I said, this show's not specifically about them, but for a high-functioning marksman like myself, it's comforting to hear that these amazing people, the superstars of our sport, started out the same way that you and I did. Learning from friends or family, showing up at a match uninvited, shooting non-threats, making mistakes, learning from them, and striving to get better. They're ordinary people that have accomplished extraordinary things. And in just a moment, you're going to get to meet one of them. But first, I want to thank our good friends, G4G Guns. After surviving an attempted kidnapping and having co-workers robbed at gunpoint, Patrick and Cassie Coburn decided to get a gun for protection, and that led them to teach others about the need to protect themselves and to be proficient with firearms, and that led to the creation of G4G Guns. It's an amazing store and an even more amazing website where you can shop for any gun, ammunition, accessories from the comfort of your own home and buy without any gimmicks or credit card fees. If you want the personal touch, visit their store at 175 Bear Road in Van Alstyne, Texas, or stop by and see them at a gun show near you on the weekends. They're great people. They offer great service, great prices, an amazing selection, and no hidden fees or gimmicks. Check them out at g4gguns.com. That's G, the number 4, guns.com. G4G Guns, the galaxy for great guns. g4gguns.com. Our special guest today hardly needs an introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm excited to have her here. She is the winner of over 140 major titles, including 45 national and 22 international titles. She's the first shooter in history, male or female, to win a national title. Is this right? In all 6 USPSA divisions? Is that 7 now?
Well, I'm 6 handgun division, so I got to get my hands on a PCC at some point.
There we go.
Yeah, the handgun
all
division.
6 handgun divisions. Julie Golob, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. It's an honor. I'm truly honored that you agreed to do this. Before we get started and we dig into your accomplishments in your pro career, I wanted to go all the way back to where you got started, to the beginning. You got started with guns really early, thanks to your dad. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I'm a daddy's girl, always will be. And we spent so much time together on the range and in the field that it was a very special bond that we had when I was a young girl that just blossomed and grew through my teenage years. So when most teenagers are rebelling and having a fit, I was heading to the range and shooting with dad. So it was pretty awesome.
That's awesome. Hunting too, all right?
Yes. Yep. And fishing. I mean, we found a season, and there was a season for everything, and we did it.
What was the first gun that you shot?
Well, I can remember shooting some 22s with him throughout the years, but I think the first real gun that I felt a connection with was his 1911. It was a 45 ACP that he used to compete in, but he downloaded it and we reloaded to such a soft load that barely functioned. But it was perfect because it was slim enough that I could hold on to it. I could still access all the triggers and the trigger and the safeties. And it was soft shooting so that I could learn how to shoot without the distraction of heavy recoil. So And this was way before production division days and IDPA even. So it goes way back, but he was very cognizant of making sure that it was a firearm that I could not only shoot well, but feel comfortable and confident with.
So how old were you when you were shooting a 1911?
14. I started when I was 14 because that was when we felt comfortable with my gun handling skills. And I had been a range officer since I was, I think I first started working with Dad at matches when I was 8. So I had a long time of building the foundation of understanding firearm safety rules and making sure that other competitors did it as well. So it was a good time.
Very cool. Tell us about your dad. What he was into competition. What sort of things was he doing?
Oh my gosh, if there was a trigger, he loved to pull it. So he did a lot of IPSC, but he shot NRA silhouette. Of course, he was an avid hunter, plinker. You know, if he found a shooting sport, he just enjoyed it, and he loved the people within it. So it was he's amazing to look up to as a parent, but also as an individual volunteer leader within the sport itself. He was a section coordinator for USPSA for a number of years, and really mentored a lot of people, including me.
What was the first gun that you bought for yourself?
Oh my goodness, that's a great question. I don't even know. That sounds awful, but I do. So I had the wonderful opportunity to shoot for the Army marksmanship for a number of years, but being a young private and having to have to live in the barracks and all of that, I was forced to use Army firearms in competition. So the moment that I was given my money to live off post and be a real adult, I purchased a high capacity 1911 a Caspian, I think it was, to win my first USPSA nationals with. So that was probably it was a prized possession too, because I didn't have a lot of money. And it was one of those things, buy a nice car, buy a nice gun. And I bought a nice gun.
Right. You shot your first USPSA national championship in 94, and you catch the eye of the Army Marksmanship Unit. Talk about that experience, that first national championship, that experience of competing at that level at that age, and then tell us a little about your time in the Army and the AMU.
Sure. Well, that first nationals for me was a pretty special experience because I didn't even go with my dad. We didn't have a lot of funds, and I think he recognized how important it was to me, and he wanted to give me every opportunity to succeed. So there was a group of shooters from upstate New York that were going to drive all the way from New York to Illinois, Berry, Illinois for nationals. And he said, "Hey, can she come along with you?" And here I am, 16 years old, shooting my first nationals with complete, not my family. They were certainly friends and mentors and great people that I shot with every month, but it was a big step. And to go to the nationals, have all of that nerves, have the excitement of, your first national championship, especially as a junior competitor. And then to have the coach of the Army marksmanship walk up to you and say, "Hey, you've got something there, kid." And then coming home to mom and dad and saying, "Hey, mom, dad, I'm going to join the Army," was a little bit of a, what?
I didn't win the championship, but I signed up for the Army.
I did. I got a great deal out of this one. And of course, there was some questions like, are you really sure about this? Do they really want you? And once all of that was ironed out and we worked out the details, it was a really great opportunity. And, back then in the mid 90s, we didn't have as much of the sponsorship presence, and of course, no social media. And so to catch the eye of a coach or a potential sponsor, it took a lot. I mean, you had to have a face-to-face. And so a lot of that was luck, and very, very fortunate for that.
So tell me about that interaction. How does this happen? The coach walks up and says, "Hey, we'd like you to sign up for the Army and come shoot for," had you ever heard of the Army Marksmanship Unit? Did you know how did he pitch it to you?
Oh, definitely. That was the same year that Merle Eddington of the U.S. Army Marksmanship Unit won the Nationals. It was the first time an AMU soldier won the national title. So it was a really big deal. And that at that point in time, I think there were 5 or 6 members of the Army shooting team that were traveling around, and I had seen them at an area championship. And so it was just as much prestige as walking up to see Jerry Michalik on the line kind of thing. So I was very well aware of who they were and their team, and a lot of articles in Front Sight magazine and such. So it was just, for me, I knew I was going into it as the only female and also very much the youngest member of the team. And so there's a lot of that, apprehension about, oh my gosh, I'm going to jump on a plane and join the Army and go through basic training and get a job and then have 1 year to prove myself to my team and my unit that I have the potential to be something. There was a lot of pressure. But at the same time, I knew that if I wanted to ever win a nationals, this was the best way to do it.
For those who are not familiar with the Army Marksmanship Unit, can you give us a little bit of an idea about the unit's purpose, what that experience was? I mean, how do you when you get in, is your job competing all the time, or how does it or do you have to prove yourself to stay in it? How does that whole thing work?
It's changed a little bit since I've been in, but the Army Marksmanship Unit is a group of, I would say, around 100 individuals that fill in certain teams. So we have the action shooting team that would shoot IDPA, USPSA, 3-gun. There's also precision pistol teams and rifle teams, as well as service teams that go and represent the Army against the Marine Corps, that sort of thing, Navy, right. Air Force. And then you also have a dedicated gunsmith team that travels around with unit members to make sure their guns are always up and running. And there are Olympic components as well as, your typical service teams. Yada, yada, yada. Long story short, it is a really neat concept because it gives the Army the opportunity to develop marksmanship skills and figure out the latest and greatest in how to pull a trigger and apply it to the regular Army. So they're also responsible for training soldiers and writing manuals and giving that kind of guidance to commanders that need to increase the marksmanship ability of their soldiers and all of that. So in addition to obviously the compete and win mission, there's also that training part of all of that. When I was in, we did a lot of training, but we also fell under recruiting command. So we did a lot of recruiting events. I worked a lot of air shows and that sort of thing. I may or may not have painted a few rocks. I will neither confirm or deny that. But for the most part, our main job was physical training, get on the range, trigger time, and ensure that we were putting ourselves in the best position to be a champion. And the slogan of the unit is still to this day, Home of Champions. So.
You had an amazing run in, was it 99? Yeah. 99, you win the Women's Open title in 7 area championships, plus the World Speed Shooting Championship and USPSA Open and Limited National Championships. 17 titles in 1 year, including 2 national championships and 2 world titles. What do you remember about that year? That was a phenomenal year.
It was, and the one thing that makes that era, pre-2000 era, pretty special is the fact that we only had 2 divisions. We didn't have all of the divisions that we have today, and so we had so many talented shooters competing head to head in both open and limited, and everything just clicked. It was at a time where we were at the smallest within the action shooting team within the Army. It was just Captain Jay Christie, and me. And so we had unlimited ammo and unlimited budget, essentially. And the only reason I didn't shoot 8 area championships that year is because it was just physically impossible. It was like going to New York and California in the same day. But, and so it was just this magic moment. It was, everything came together. And I like to tell people that winning is contagious. And when you're young and you capture that first win and you figure it all out, the next one becomes easier and easier and easier. And then unfortunately, when you take a break over the winter time and things change a little bit. But you see this in sports, like we've seen years where, Rob Latham was undefeated and unbelievable. Jerry Barnhart, same thing. Fast forward to Dave Savigny, Bob Vogel, and Ben Steger. And, you have these moments where everything all clicks and they have this incredible run. And it's very hard to maintain, but when it happens, it's very special.
No doubt. So you were in for almost 8 years, right?
Yes.
Well, first, thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you.
40 titles during that run, and you get out in what, 2003?
Yes.
So what did those years with AMU teach you that you carried forward and that has influenced your pro career?
I think that obviously, when you're in the military, you learn a lot about personal discipline. You can't always say exactly what you want to say when you want to say it, unlike times today. So I learned a lot about, leadership and the importance of, doing your best in times where things may be challenging. I had a great run in 1999 and we had a leadership change. And then all of a sudden, everything that I knew that was successful, that worked for me, changed almost overnight. And I had a hard time with that. And it's all about maturity and growth. But I think most of all, I think that the Army taught me how to, to be tough, to understand that not everything is going to be perfect all the time and make the most of everything that you can.
Very cool. So you mentioned your dad's willingness to pretty much do everything. As long as there was a trigger, he wanted to pull it.
Yeah.
I see from looking through your list of accomplishments, I'm seeing that I'm getting the sense that you got a love of challenges from him. You've got titles in USPSA, IDPA, IPSC, Biachi Cup, Steel Challenge, and of all things, ICORE. You picked up a revolver and went out and won titles in ICORE. What made you decide to pick up a wheel gun and compete with it after all those years of shooting?
It's funny. Obviously in the Army and during the beginning years, it was all about open and limited. But when I got out, I worked for a short time for Glock. And then Smith & Wesson whisked me away and offered me something that I couldn't pass up. And with that came the opportunity to try something new. 1911s, revolvers, production guns, rifles. It became this like, oh my gosh, this is so neat. And not only do I have the opportunity to compete, which is, I'm very competitive. I love it. But now I have a whole other, it's like so many doors were open to me. And it was it still is very exciting to be able to try different things. And it keeps things fresh, because enjoying one's shooting sport over time, I will always love USPSA because it's where I cut my teeth. But to be able to learn things from other shooting sports, I've learned something every time I compete, and I always want that to happen. The second I stop learning and stop enjoying it, I'm done. I'll hang my hat and I don't know, take pictures or something.
Is there anything that you have not tried that you would like to?
Oh, yes. I mean, I look at how PRS is, and I look at even SAS. I mean, cowboy action is exciting to me.
Right.
The funny thing is, I used to, when I was younger, have such an ego about something where like, oh, if I'm going to try it, I better win it, But now, I don't know if it's motherhood or just getting older. I just appreciate the idiosyncrasies of each individual sport, and of course the people in them, combined with the little challenges and the learning process. It's really unique.
So what year was it that you picked up IDPA?
I want to say 2005 or 2006, I believe. 5 maybe, or maybe 4.
4.
Maybe 2004. Yep.
4. I'm looking at the list here. So at that point, you had tons of competitive shooting experience, over 40 titles in USPSA and IPSC and Biachi Cup. Why pick up IDPA? Was it just another challenge? Was there something about IDPA that interested you? What was the interest in IDPA in 2004? And what do you remember about that first year?
I think that it was just a product of the environment. So I got out in the Army. I actually decided I didn't want to shoot again. I was so burnt out. I was done, right? And then I went to a local club match, and I'm like, oh, I love this. Why did I leave? After that happened, I took the opportunity to shoot for Glock. And all of a sudden I went from one extreme to another. I went from compensated, open gun, fast and furious, and basically unlimited rounds in the magazine, to a G17 or a G34. And and with that came obviously the, having to compete in production, and then also IDPA. So it was just kind of how things turned up. And one of the things that I've always appreciated about IDPA is the constant stress on accuracy. And I like that. It plays to my strengths very well. I'm more of an accurate shooter than I would say a speed shooter. So it was a lot of fun. And I feel like, IDPA has evolved so much over the years. You have those first beginning national championships where a lot of the rules were up in the air. And then in 2004 and 2005, even through 2008, there was a lot of development. Of course, and the constant joke is like IDPA is like the weather. It's changing all the time, right?
Right.
Especially with the rules. But I feel like the sheer growth that it has had over the period of its existence to be competitive with the numbers that USPSA membership has, that's saying something. And I think it's a vital sport, especially for those who are interested in improving their gun handling skills with their carry guns. So it's pretty cool deal.
You started in 2004 and you immediately were winning. You won national titles in 2004, again in 2005, again in 2006, and then in 2010. Since 2010, how much IDPA have you been shooting?
I basically, my IDPA life coincides with the birth of my children. I'll be honest with you. I took some time off, and my first daughter was born in 2008. I stopped shooting for a complete year and got back to it in 2010. And then before you know it, we were thinking about new ones, and life happens and everything else. And I haven't been back. It's something I look forward to eventually. But I seem to take more on my plate in other areas, and so I will eventually head back. But I just don't know when.
That's all right. Have you got any fun memories from those 6 years of shooting IDPA and doing it well?
It's funny. I think that especially during those years, IDPA was very innovative. So you would go to the Carolina Cup and you'd be like, what can I shoot through that? I don't know. Let's try it, right? And you'd have some crazy targets that you never see in USPSA because of consistency reasons and rules and what have you. It's funny. I remember the first time I shot in the dark, with a flashlight and thought, oh my gosh, this is crazy and awesome fun. And I need to get better at this. And what an eye-opening experience that was. And I feel like of all the shooting sports out there, like my jitters get up a little bit more with IDPA because you don't get to walk through the courses quite so much, and you don't get the choreograph. And if you have a surprise stage, like I don't even know if they still have them, but a surprise stage, you really get those juices, you get those kind of jitters that, of course there are nerves involved with other shooting sports. And trust me, my knees still knock when I'm standing at the line at Bianchi, but it's a different kind of nerves.
That's interesting. Because that's interesting and comforting to hear that someone with your with your experience would experience that same sort of, the buzzer brain, the jitters, because you don't have as much of the prep going into it. And the people who are new to IDPA or not as experienced as you are, the juices and the nerves are very similar but for a little bit of a different reason. We don't have all the experience to draw from, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen either.
We're all in the same boat. Exactly. Yeah.
So to boil it down, what was it that you loved so much about IDPA? What was it about that sport, apart from the others, that sets it apart that you think that you love about it?
I would say, it all comes down to the people. And I know may sound cheesy, but every sport has its own core group of people and what they appreciate. And so, like, you go to an ICORE event and you're walking around with a bunch of wheel gunners and they have their own little way of life. And it's the same with IDPA. I guess I appreciate the fact that so many IDPA shooters are in the sport for a sheer desire to become better in order to potentially save their own lives or the lives of their families. And I appreciate that. And I think that's one of the things that makes IDPA very appealing. And of course, there's no correlation between a game and real life. But at the end of the day, when you can reload successfully and you can feel comfortable and confident with getting a sight picture on a target and squeezing a trigger and hitting, something that's a reasonable distance away, that's a huge confidence builder.
Mm-hmm. In recent years, your career has changed a bit. You're still competing at a high level, but your role in the shooting sports, I think, has changed. I think you would probably agree. You've taken on more of a role as a a spokesperson for gun safety, for the Second Amendment, including running for the board of directors at the NRA. Now, and I mentioned earlier, if you look at your career and you look at all the things you've done, you've written books, you're publishing recipes and hunting, and you're in the outdoors a lot. You talk about balancing life challenges. Talk about the challenge of balancing all of that with life's most amazing challenge, which is being a mom.
Right. So much of my motivation, especially now, especially with, work with Project Child Safe and work with the NRA, is that, I want as much opportunity for my own daughters as I had, and more so even. And, I think that, being a young teenager shooter in upstate New York growing up, I lived through the assault weapons ban. I had to, not talk about my passion, my sport in my school environment. And so it was like Fight Club, right? You don't talk about it.
Don't talk about Fight Club.
Exactly. And today we have so much more opportunity and ways to connect, and we don't have to rely on the story being told by the media. We have an opportunity to tell it ourselves. And yes, it may be challenging to do so in this massive world of connection and social media. But I feel like now more than ever, telling our story, opening eyes, and getting out there that this is more than just wanting to go shoot a bunch of guns and that sort of thing. It's an American heritage. It's a history thing. It's a family thing. It's a personal protection thing. It's an individual thing. It's an individual right. And I want to do my best to encourage as many people as I can to see that and enjoy it.
Very good. What advice would you give young shooters, especially girls who are interested in guns and shooting sports, but they don't know what to do? They don't know whether to, and maybe they don't have the guidance and the coaching that you had from your dad. They might be intimidated by the boy sport. What advice do you have for young female shooters?
Never be afraid to ask the questions. I know it's intimidating, and I tell this from my oldest daughter all the time. She can get shy, and I remember being shy, but so much opportunity can happen when you just stop, take a moment, introduce yourself, say thank you, and ask the questions that you want to have the answers to, and don't be afraid to ask many people, because doors open, and it's a wonderful opportunity, and you never want to have that regret that you didn't.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Julie, you're an amazing role model, a wonderful ambassador for the sports and for the Second Amendment. Thank you so much. It's been a delight to talk to you, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to come on the show.
Oh, it's been so much fun. I appreciate it.
All right, that's all the time that we've got for today. I want to thank our special guest, Julie Golob, for coming onto the show to share her story. But as they say, there's more to the story. Julie was very kind, very gracious to come onto the show and spend nearly an hour with me sharing about her experiences and her career. So if you want to hear the rest of the interview, it's going to be available to supporters of the show on our Patreon site. Go to unloadpodcast.com/extra and sign up today, and you can hear our full interview with Julie and the full interview that we did previously with Bob Vogel. Like I said, that's all the time we've got. Thank you again for listening. Tune in again next time for another episode of Unload and Show Clear.